So we want to say there's a number of people that are online from all across the United States that are here today. And in these pictures, you can clearly see the impact of love and kindness, care, community, relationships that have taken place from so many different people all across the United States, both in Michigan, which there's a group there listening right now, as well as in East Tennessee and Harrogate, And obviously this is my sister Tammy. And Judy was our mom.
And this is Earl.
I'm Earl. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm her son. And so what we're going to do tonight is we're just going to go through some thoughts. My sister will share some. And then I'll share some. And then we'll play a song that was pretty important to us at the end. Okay. Good luck.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank all of you for being here today and for watching online to celebrate and honor the beautiful life of our mom, Judy. Mom was a loving mother, a caring daughter, grandmother, and great-grandmother. She had such a generous heart and a wonderful smile and the cutest little nose. She had a childlike spirit, a carefree personality, and she loves babies. She also loved to read, love-inspired series books, kept track of how many books she was reading, read over 1,000 of them. She enjoyed knitting washcloths for people and handing them out wherever she went. And even though she didn't have much, if she had it and you needed it, she would give it to you. She was devoted to the Lord, read her Bible every day, and raised us in a Christian home. She was actively involved in her church and selfishly served others. She loved the Collinsworth family, which was the second song that we played. And it's a Southern gospel group. She was very, very thankful when they called her and FaceTimed her and sang to her and encouraged her because she had always wanted to meet them. And during her final days on earth, that was such an encouragement and a blessing. Mama was a hugger. If you came into her presence, the first thing you got was, hi, and a hug. She loved hugs, and she gave the best hugs. I will never forget how wonderful she made our childhood. We never had to ask to invite somebody over. She was always open to have somebody at the house and counted the people that were there for dinner. She loved having people around. This was even true during her 18-month battle with cancer. At times she was weak and it was hard and she would have to go off by herself. But she still wanted to be present with family and friends, and we were able to make so many memories. I even remember as a child growing up how fun she made everything. If there was an opportunity to do something fun, we did it. She even made the ordinary days fun and full of joy, from playing cards and board games to having chocolate chip cookie baking contests, which the boys never said who won, to making candy, cinnamon toothpicks, our Sunday night nachos, making homemade pizza, to bonfires, birthday parties, running a paper route, and rolling the coins. The list goes on and on. She was involved in whatever we did. She volunteered in our classrooms and she worked in the cafeteria at our school. Whether it was home, school, or church, she was there. One thing that will always make me smile is one Christmas, while we were singing Christmas carols and decorating, we were baking cookies and she was in the kitchen, I was in the living room, and the song, "Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire," came on, and she goes, "Whose nuts are roasting?" And I was like, "Chess's!" And we still laugh at that to this day. She thoroughly enjoyed being around her friends and family, and she tried to get everyone to play her favorite game, Dummy Rummy. She liked to go fast over hills, around the curves in the car. We loved taking the hilly way to church when we were young. And when she was young, she would ride her bicycle through the puddles. And when she does these things, she always goes, "Wee!" And sometimes people would say, "That's too much wee, didn't you, Kayla?" Her carefree, happy-go-lucky personality could bring a smile to anybody's face, and it will be truly missed. But it gives us so many wonderful memories to ponder in our hearts and laughter to brighten our days. So you certainly will be missed. You are a precious soul, Mama, and I will always, always love you.
glasses. Yeah, you know, Tammy did say something that we know. I guess Tammy and I know, and some dear friends know, like Keena back at home or Patrick. We had a wonderful, wonderful childhood. It was awesome. You know, when I think back at things like, you say the Hilly Way or or fun, or now when you said something, I didn't look at your notes ahead of time. You said we never had to ask to invite people over. I think that's where I got it from. My wife knows. I just invite people and then say, "Oops, I forgot. I should have done this." You know, we grew up on a place called Airport Hill, which we just had so many funny stories and funny memories of the things that we did. And out on a farm there in East Tennessee was awesome. I remember on Airport Hill, these are funny stories that come to mind for me as I was writing this. I was thinking of things like, probably a story that I don't know if a single person here knows that came back to memory. When I was playing with matches in the back and catching the field on fire. And I remember Mom running out of the house with mop water and putting the fire out, and then of course me trying to lie my way out of it. That did not work. I just remember that. I remember that my mom hated snakes, which was a joy to a young boy, because I distinctly remember chasing her around with them. Isn't that just wonderful? We were outside more than in. We made wonderful, wonderful friends. She was always there with my dad and us raising baby calves. And she was there as a mom. My dad was a wonderful man, but he truly worked us. You know, it was nothing to put 1,000 bales of hay up a day. And I always remember Mom yelling at my dad saying, "You work those boys like slaves." But I thought that was good. It turned out well for us to have a good work ethic. But Mom was trying to protect her babies, right? Isn't that what mothers do? From Boy Scout awards that she was there to give us and pin on us. I remember camping together at Douglas Lake Campground in a tent, and that's exactly why we don't have one. It was awful in the rain. I remember being sick, and it was always the case that she would put a wet, cold washcloth on her forehead. Of course, Tara knows what that means to me. On our honeymoon, I got sick on our honeymoon the second night, and as I'm vomiting, I was yelling for Tara to put a wet washcloth on my forehead, and she ignored me the entire time and pretended to be asleep. But my mom was there. Doing that, and that's where that came from. It's funny how you bring those things in your marriage. Expectations from your previous past. This sounds odd, but I remember her and Tammy actually peeling the skin off my face when I blew it up. Things that dumb kids do, like throwing aerosol cans in fires and black spray paint, blowing up and burning my face off, of course, every day, as a mother would do, diligently following the doctor's orders so that I'm as good looking as I am today. Or I would have been Freddy Krueger, who knows what I would have looked at if my mom had not been there. Or I remember going to forestry camp, odd things that no one else does in this world, forestry camp, and Mom being there to say, "I'm so proud that you were selected." You know, I think the reality is, you hear the birds chirping. You know, that she taught us to teach us about God. That was a huge value. She was there to worry, as odd as it is. I think I don't know if moms are programmed to do that, but our mom was programmed to worry about us when we were in the caves and in the woods and running around the farm, literally in the middle of nowhere, and wondering when we'd get home. She was scared when we went to Chicago. I went to Moody Bible Institute, and I remember, huge city, Mom scared to death that she was going to leave her little boy there. Of course, I had no clue. She should have been scared. She really should have. I thought, no problem at all. Unbelievable. She wasn't perfect, of course. We all fail in many ways. But the thing that, as I reflect, and as Tammy reflects, that is consistent, what never changed was her love for us. You know, actually, being a parent, as you understand being a parent, it teaches you about God. Because you don't get it when you're young. These little young ones up here, you guys don't get anything. You don't get how much you're loved and how much you're cherished. I've learned that in life, the depth of a parent's love is far greater than the depth of the child's love towards them. I've learned that. And I'm really the guilty one here, as life is so often about me and not about others in that context. You know, if you really understand where the foundation of love begins, you begin to think about, some of you experience this, an ultrasound, and you begin to see a little baby, and see a little nose, and maybe you see something that looks like a person. I mean, in today's world, you can get 3D ultrasounds, but back then we didn't have that. You know, when the baby comes, what's one of the first things you do? You're counting the toes, and you're counting the fingers, and you're really in awe of the beauty of that creation. God gave you that child. It is incredible, but of course, when I was a baby, I didn't get it. It was all about me. Change my diaper, give me food, hug me. That's all it was about. But Mom, no doubt, looked at her eyes and compared them to hers and probably counted my hairs about the same as I have now, 1 or 2, very few. But you know what I'm talking about. You are in awe, in deep love for that child. It's really disproportionate. Their smile, how about when they develop angry eyes? They start learning how to use their eyebrows. It's pretty incredible. That love, you know, God teaches me a lot about his perspective towards me as I love my children. You know, when I think about, of course I have 4 kids. Kelsey is here, and I say this to her, she's a duplicate of me. She's exactly the same as me, except she's a girl. And she has the same eyes, and we have the same bad teeth prior to braces. And I've got dents all over my body, literally. I mean, if you look at me, you know, I think Taylor actually one time, just as a young little girl, crawled on my lap and started doing this and said, "Daddy, did you know you have like 11 dents in your head?" I said, "No, I didn't know. Thank you for sharing that." But I was talking to my mom, and she said, "Did you know when you were a little boy, you were incredibly clumsy?" Well, Kelsey is incredibly clumsy. What you think about when you have a child, every one of them, is all the details. Do you know what I'm talking about? The details that distinguish them as a person, that you love them with such a great, I want to say this word, unique love. My children have heard me say this before, but each one of them, how beautifully they are, and how unique they are made. And that love, it's interesting, when you have one child, you're like, how can I love a second child as much as I love this one? It's impossible. But then when you have that second one, and you think of that second one, you think, I love this one at 100%. Every bit of me loves this one as if they're the only one. And I think about that story, and I think about God's love as it projects towards us. When he thinks of you and all of your details, he thinks of you as if you're the only one. It is such a beautiful picture of parenting. And the details, no doubt, my mom thought about me. And as you have children, some of you do and don't, but as you have children, you think about things like, you know, this one is ours. Look what God has given us. Look what has been created. God talks about this. As a matter of fact, if you look at Psalm chapter 139, many of you know this. In verse 13, it says, "For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. For I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In the book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there were none of them." And you just, you know, as I started this, I said, understanding parenthood and understanding my mom's love for me just helps me to understand God's perspective, his gaze towards me. He loves every detail of you. For he formed you and he knew you before there was one day. How you were knitted together, as I say, in your mommy's tummy. But then, of course, that stage of babyhood doesn't stay there. You start turning into young ladies and young men, and you begin to explore. You notice those, when the children start to grow up, the silly, silly things you do, like you're so into that, your whole being is leaning towards them. You're like, what did they eat? How much did they eat? Your children are going to have to get used to these things, like, and did they poop? And what color was it? The detail as a parent. You have such a bend of love and care and a detail toward your children. It's crazy, even when you're talking about poop. How about when they roll over for the first time? It was no different than someone winning the Super Bowl. You thought it was the greatest thing that ever happened in the world. To when they begin to crawl, and you're like, I can't believe it! They're crawling! Or, of course, when they walk, that's just awesome. And then, of course, the other half of that is when they fall, and they get their bruises, and you hold them, and I think at times you hurt as much or more than they do because you cherish them and you love them. Yeah. I think the moments when you hear things like, they are so cute. How about this? They look just like you. What does that do to the inside of you? You're like, yeah, that one is mine. That one is mine. That one is mine. You didn't create them, but they came from you, and God gave them to you, through you. But in essence, they reflect you. They reflect you. As I was thinking about this time to just share with you about Mom, there was just verses going through my head, and of course in Genesis we know things that talks about, like, God says that we are created in his image. And I kind of get that. It's like the depth of love that I have for my kids, it pales in comparison, but it is somewhat understood greater when I understand my love for my child. And my son, he looks like me. He's not a perfect copy, but he's close. You can tell that's my boy. And I think about God. He says, that's my son. He knows my name. Then, of course, kids keep growing. They become independent. You are with them in the ups and downs of life. You guys remember these stages? You probably went through them or are going through them. But you may have the joy of raising up children. When they play sports, I always believed this was true. They would charge $5 to get into a basketball game. I'm like, these guys are idiots. If they could charge $100 for every game, and I would be there, because the value of watching, you know what I'm talking about? That one little hit or that one single, I'm thinking of Lindsay back here, my little girl. I've still got the film when she was this tall and her competitors were this tall, and her dribbling down the court and scoring the layup, and I'm like, yes, that's my little girl. Or with Taylor, I was thinking of Taylor and the art shindig she did, where she's dancing around and she sang, and she was Chip on Beauty and the Beast, and all the different, you know what? We love them. We love them. We want to be there with them. Sadly, things like when they start dating, and that hurts sometimes, and you're like, I don't think that's a good idea, or I think that's a good idea, but they start becoming independent to where they're like, thanks for your opinion, and it's only that, an opinion. And then, of course, at times it doesn't go so well, and the child is crying, and if you ever hold that child, you know what I'm talking about. Your heart hurts because their heart hurts. That's how God is towards us. He hurts. He feels our pain. He knows our days. He understands the details. He rejoices as we rejoice. When I think about friends, like many of you are here, God gave us each other. That's intentional. It's beautiful. Or how about, this is an awful word, and I'm hesitant to say it, homework. Homework. I remember for me, I did not like high school or middle school or grade school or elementary school or kindergarten. I didn't like school. It was very, very hard. And I struggled. If I could get an A one time in my life, that would have been awesome. I couldn't get an A. I was dyslexic. I could barely read. I, even to this day, remember kindergarten class. And I remember them doing something like write something. I don't know what it was, but I just remember the teacher said, write something, and then when you're done writing it, you can put it up here on my desk, and then you can go out and play. And I distinctly remember that, you guys know how Charlie Brown writes? He uses lines. He goes, and I was like, yes. And of course, I just did that, and then ran up and ran out. And I thought when I finally got done with school, it was over with. I was so excited. But then I started having kids. And then, of course, what happened? I had to go through middle school again. I had to go through high school multiple times. And I didn't realize what I was signing up for. But the reality is I remember, Tara helped me with this, my attitude was not wonderful. I was like, stupid homework. I thought I was done with this. And then I realized I didn't have to do it. I got to do it. And that pivoting thought where I got to do science again. And Tara got to make another wagon for the Pilgrim story and history class. But you love your kids. You get to be with them. Sometimes it isn't great. The reality with kids, it isn't always great, especially when they learn the word no. They learn no. They start exercising their independence. Like, I don't want to. Sometimes they rebel. They say things like, thank you, but I want to. This is what I want to do when I want to do it, how I want to do it, and I didn't ask for your opinion. It's just interesting. There's this process of where, of course, I'm the smartest person in the room. Of course, I know everything. Of course, I've got life all figured out. That's pretty common for most people growing up. But it's interesting. From a parent's perspective, it's interesting. Patience is deeper. Patience is longer. It's more mature. We go, yeah, okay, that's cool. I love you still. That's cool. It's deeper. There's a deep patience. Why? Because you love disproportionately, in my opinion. Disproportionately. The love is not the same. When they ignore you, you still love them. I mean, some of my greatest failures, I'm trying to get to the end of my life with less regrets. That's what I'm trying to do. One of my greatest regrets, of course, was my brother is I didn't spend time with him when he was dying of cancer at 21. And one of the very last things my brother said to me when I leaned down to him when he was going into surgery, I said, John, I love you. He said, I'm surprised you came. Those were his last words to me. I've forgiven myself for my stupidity as a young man, because all I cared about was my 68 Mustang that I was restoring, my job, and hot chicks. That's all I cared about. And I didn't care about spending time with my brother. Silly. Or even still yet, my dad died a few years ago. And it's just crazy to think this. But it was like 3 years before he died that I started randomly calling him about nothing. How are you? What's your day like? And how's the cows? And silly stuff. But I'm very, very sad to say this. When I called my dad one time, he said, what do you want? And I was like, I don't want anything. I was just calling to say hi. But what was that? It's a disproportionate. My dad had no problem calling me. My dad had no problem giving to me or loving me. My mom was always there and cared for me. But I wasn't always there. It's just interesting. This experience that I just went through with losing Mom, it brought into perspective the unbalanced relationship of love, but it also created more clarity for how God viewed me in my relationship with God. You know, a verse that comes to mind, or before I talk about that for a second, is, I remember this. When someone else takes the first place. And I remember that with Lindsay. And Tim doesn't know this story. But Lindsay was cheerleader at Cedarville. And I remember her down in the court. And of course, I'm there for Lindsay. And I'm staring at Lindsay. There's nobody else on that entire court. There's nobody out there but her. But I remember looking at her when she was looking up, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Tim. And I could see she was looking at Tim. I had been replaced. I was being ignored. My heart still hurts. But we step aside. We often, in relationship to God, ignore Him. That's a reality. We go astray. I read this verse in Isaiah 1. We like sheep go astray, each have turned their own way. Ironically, today the cows got out. And I was like, who said the word stupid sheep? It should say cows right there. Each cow goes its own way because they were doing what they wanted to do. But that's us in relationship to God. We do our gig whenever we want, however we want. It's just because life is about me. Psalm 86:15. But you, O Lord, are a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. It reminded me of that, like my mom and my dad. And what I mean by that is that I wasn't always there to love them, but what? They were always there to love me. Even when it was disproportionate, even when I ignored them and wasn't there for them to the same degree that they were there for me. And finally, it's that stage when they become more mature in life and they send you a text. That's awesome. Or they make a phone call to you to talk about things you don't even care about. Topics that don't mean anything to you, but they're excited about. And you're excited just to hear them jibber jabber. It's awesome. Your heart melts when they give you a hug. You endure when they're clueless, because you were once clueless. You forgive when they say, I'm sorry, because you also have screwed up so much. Then they use that magical word, mommy and daddy. You guys know what I'm talking about? I said to my children, the most powerful word ever is mommy and daddy. Mm-hmm. And when they say, mommy, would you? Or daddy, would you? And you're like, if it is good, I want to give it to you. But sometimes it's not good for you and you don't see it, so you don't get it. Don't play on the white lines or the yellow lines in the road. Bad idea. I want to know. We want to give good gifts to those that we love. Why do we do that? Why do we give? Because you love them. They are everything to you. They are everything to you. God gave them to you in your womb, in your mommy's womb. And you were there their entire life. Really, in essence, you think about it, you would die for them. The trips that we've taken to Yellowstone with my family, the times that I remember Taylor, Alberta Falls, in the Rocky Mountains, actually. And I remember we were hiking on a very long trip, and she was maybe 5 years old. We got to the top of this mountain, this huge waterfall. And there was no fence, there was no gate, and she was just a little girl. She took off running right at it. And I just freaked out, because she ran, and then she stopped right at the edge. And I had already determined in my mind I was jumping in. Because why? I mean, if there was only 1% chance that I could save her, I would have jumped. I didn't have enough time. I don't know if that was the right decision or not. I didn't have time to think about a wife and 3 other kids. All I was thinking about was my little baby jumping off, falling into the waterfall. But the point being, I would give my life for my family, and you would too. Why do I bring these things up? Because this experience for me, losing Mom, it teaches me more about God. It helps me understand His perspective and His thoughts, His gaze, His attention, His heart, His patience, His suffering. Why would God send His Son to die for me? The Bible says in 1 Thessalonians, it says that 4:13 says that He paid a ransom for us. That He paid our ransom. What is that? We were in debt to sin, a sin that we could not pay, a penalty that we couldn't do it on our own. He said, "I'll do it for you." The reality, for me, as I walked through this experience, it forced me to do a few things. It forced me to ask if I'm crazy, if I'm nuts. Do I believe in God or do I not? I had to do that. I remember, this is the text that I wrote. I wrote to some of my closest friends. This experience forces me to ask, what happens when you die? It's either far to the left, everything is an accident. All that we see, all of creation, everything is all an accident. It's either far to the left, no God at all, we're just dirt that fell together. Or the other side to the right. God really does exist and loves us and wants us and welcomes us back to Himself. There is no in between. I remember as my mom was being wheeled out after she had passed, they're like, "Hey, do you want to say goodbye to her again?" She's not here. It was just a physical body. Her spirit was gone. And it was just so distinguished for me, to where, like all of you, have consciousness and you're a person. And, there's blood running through your veins, and you are a person. But when you die, you are no longer there. It's simply a corpse. And it was just so black and white. It forced me to ask, what just happened? What's really going on? We grieve. I get it. I get it. I mean, that was the hardest experience of my life. As a matter of fact, we'll play a song here in just a second. When you're looking into someone's eyes, 1 foot away, and they die, that's amazing. But God is good. I remember when my dad was dying. I remember at the farmhouse, and my dad had cancer from smoking cigarettes for 50 years. He started at 13, died at 63. And I remember walking into the farmhouse the day I got there, and he was in so much pain because the cancer went from his lungs to every part of his body, his bones, his kidneys, everywhere. And he was just inside. He couldn't sit down. He couldn't stand up. He couldn't lay down. That he wasn't in pain. And I remember he waddled off and went to bed, and I went over to the other farmhouse and slept and got up the next morning. I remember very distinctly getting on my knees and saying, "God, I'm not going to ask you to heal my dad. It's unrealistic. It's unrealistic. But because I am your son and you know my name, would you do this for me? Just like I would give any great gift to my children." I said, "Would you take away his pain?" And then I remember going back over to the farmhouse and walking in and sitting there waiting. And then Dad came waddling out of the bedroom. And the first thing I said was, "Dad, how's your pain?" He said, I don't hurt anymore." And God gave us that week. For a full week, we got to play redneck. We got to ride around in this pickup truck and fix all the little fences and do all that type of stuff. Why do I tell you that? And then I flew away back to Chicago, and he died very shortly after. I mean, the day that I left, the next day the pain returned, and just a couple weeks later he died. It's God's love his compelling love, never-ending love, his enduring love, the same things that we have for our children is God's view towards us. And just the same thing happened again with my mom. For multiple days, Tammy and I were there, and Mom didn't open her eyes, and she didn't move her arms, and I guess she could have just passed quietly, and that might have been a great gift. But there was another side to that. I remember as she was passing, just in the last, I would say, 2 minutes, she opened her eyes, and she looked right at our faces, and she reached for us to hold us. It's interesting, because she knew we were there. And it was a great gift that God would give Tammy and I to be able to experience a mother's love. Because not perfect, not a perfect mom, good mom. Not a perfect mom, good mom. One that love does not stop, regardless of who we are. But what does it do inside of me? It reminds me of who God is to me. And that's what this experience did for me. And as Tammy and I said goodbye, right? Tammy was playing instrumental hymns on her phone. And just as soon as she passed, the next hymn came up, which was very fitting. As great is thy faithfulness. And it wasn't words, it was music, piano, or whatever. Great is thy faithfulness. And inside of me I said, of course. Even when we're crazy unfaithful, God is faithful. And I was like, of course. Even when we're crazy unfaithful, and we're selfish, and we care all about our life, and his gaze is bent towards us, and he loves us, and wants to be with us, he is faithful. That's what I said, of course. So we'll just listen to this, and you can sing in your mind and your heart, and then we'll be done today. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, everyone.